Ever wondered what it was like to hold the fate of life and death in your hands? In the dark, brutal world of medieval justice, the executioner wasn't just a killer, he was a figure shrouded in fear, isolation, and bloodshed. Let's take a closer look at the gruesome life of a medieval executioner. In today's video, we're diving into the gruesome and fascinating life of the medieval executioner, exploring the chilling realities behind their role in the kingdom. Stay tuned as we uncover the untold stories from history's most notorious job. The position of executioner in medieval Europe was both a necessary and deeply stigmatized role. Those who found themselves in this position were often thrust into it not by choice, but due to societal demands, circumstance, or even family tradition. The role itself was one of extreme gravity, requiring emotional detachment and the ability to execute a fellow human being without hesitation. Despite the fact that executioners performed an essential service to society, they were frequently regarded as morally compromised figures. Their task, to carry out death sentences, was viewed with disgust, even though they were merely following the orders of the authorities. As a result, executioners were often outcast within their communities, with few seeking to associate with them. Medieval societies, lacking the complex criminal justice systems that we have today, relied heavily on public spectacle as a form of punishment. Punishments for crimes were often harsh and conducted in public forums to serve as both a deterrent and a form of retribution. Executioners were at the center of this system, tasked not only with carrying out death sentences but also with administering various forms of corporal punishment, such as floggings, branding, and mutilations. Despite the importance of their work, executioners were considered some of the most despised individuals in society, which placed them in a precarious position. They were often ostracized and treated with disdain, even though they were simply fulfilling their legally assigned duties. The nature of the executioner's work was intrinsically tied to the public. In an era before executions took place in private or behind closed doors, they were viewed as a form of public spectacle. Large crowds would gather to witness the execution of criminals, and it was seen as a form of social control, reinforcing the laws of the land through the dramatic visual display of punishment. The executioner had a critical role in ensuring that the sentence was carried out swiftly and without unnecessary pain. However, many executions were far from merciful. The medieval judicial system was harsh, and the executioner's task was often brutal, reflecting the grim reality of punishment in that period. Despite their central role in maintaining order and enforcing justice, executioners were generally isolated from society. They were often forced to live on the outskirts of towns or villages, away from the general populace. This separation was a direct result of the social stigma attached to their profession. In medieval thought, executioners were viewed as tainted by their connection to death and suffering. This belief was deeply ingrained in society, and as a result, executioners were frequently avoided by others. Social interactions were limited, and the executioner was considered morally corrupt, even though they were simply carrying out the orders of the state. The stigma was so severe that it extended to the executioner's family, with children of executioners often being treated as outcasts and denied opportunities for integration into mainstream society. This societal isolation created a sense of separation for executioners, and many turned to their fellow workers in similarly despised professions for companionship and support. The executioner, along with those working as gravediggers, butchers, and other unclean workers, formed their own isolated communities. These workers shared a common understanding of being ostracized and looked down upon by the wider society. The isolation extended even to marriage prospects. It was difficult for executioners to find spouses from respectable families, as the stigma attached to the profession was too great. As a result, executioners often married the daughters of other workers in similarly low-status occupations. Over time, this led to a dynastic system, with the profession of executioner passing from father to son. The children of executioners were frequently kept out of school to ensure they remained separate from other children, perpetuating the cycle of social exclusion. Interestingly, while executioners were marginalized socially, they were not entirely cut off from economic opportunities. Some executioners found ways to supplement their incomes through unofficial means. The families of those condemned to death would often pay extra to the executioner in the hopes that their loved one's execution would be carried out more quickly or with less pain. Initially, the executioner was allowed to claim the belongings of those being executed, but this privilege expanded over time. Executioners were permitted to take the clothing of the condemned, which they could sell at a profit. In some cases, executioners could also sell body parts of the executed. Alchemists believed that parts of the body, such as hands or blood, possessed magical properties. As a result, the body parts of executed criminals were in demand, and executioners could profit from selling them to those interested in their supposed mystical qualities. Despite the social stigma, executioners did have some legal rights, which provided them with certain privileges. In some regions, the church granted absolution to executioners for any sins they committed while carrying out their duties, acknowledging that their role was part of a greater legal and social order. This recognition provided a measure of legitimacy to their position. However, it did little to alleviate the societal disdain they faced. While the legal protection was important, it did not shield executioners from the contempt of the common people. In some cases, executioners were even given special privileges, such as the right to attend court proceedings or participate in public events. But these privileges were often the exception rather than the rule. Executioners were generally excluded from many aspects of public life, further cementing their status as outsiders. One of the most significant shifts in the perception of executioners came with the French Revolution. The upheaval of the revolution brought about radical changes, not just in politics but also in the social structure. The revolution provided the impetus for the professionalization of the executioner. During this period, the Sanson family, who had served as executioners to the French monarchy for over 150 years, gained a certain level of public prominence. The execution of King Louis XVI in 1793 marked a pivotal moment for the Sansons, and they became some of the most famous executioners in French history. The rise of the Sanson family coincided with a broader shift in how executioners were viewed in French society. The revolution promoted the idea of equality among all citizens, which extended to the executioners. The new republican ideals helped to diminish the stigma attached to the position, and some executioners began to gain a degree of civic equality. Despite these changes, the legacy of executioners remained complex. While their role in society evolved over time, negative perceptions of executioners continued to linger. The public fascination with executions during the Revolution led to an increase in ceremonial executions, such as those carried out with the guillotine. The guillotine became a symbol of the Revolution itself, representing the harsh measures taken to enforce its ideals. In time, however, as executions became more private and less frequent, the role of the executioner began to fade. But even as the profession diminished, the stigma continued to exist, particularly for those who had been executioners during the more turbulent periods of history. Retirement from the profession was not an easy matter. Many executioners, once they had taken up the role, found it difficult to leave. Finding a suitable successor was not a simple task, as the position of executioner required extensive training. An apprentice had to be selected and trained for many years before they could assume the duties of the executioner. The process was formal and rigid, and only after passing a stringent examination could an apprentice officially take over the role. This ensured that the trade of executioner continued in an orderly fashion, but it also perpetuated the cycle of social isolation. The rigid requirements for becoming an executioner also ensured that it remained a profession passed down from father to son, limiting opportunities for others to enter the field. With each new generation, the executioner's family became more entrenched in the stigma, often forced to live on the fringes of society. The training itself was grueling, focusing not only on the physical skills needed for execution, but also on the psychological toll it would take. As a result, those who took up the mantle often did so with a heavy heart, bound by tradition and necessity. The evolution of the role of executioners from the Middle Ages to the early modern period reflects the complex relationship between justice, punishment, and society. Executioners were necessary for the enforcement of the law, but their social status was one of profound isolation and disdain. Despite their crucial role in maintaining order and upholding the law, executioners were shunned by society. The legacy of the executioner serves as a reminder of the harshness of medieval justice, and the intricate dynamics between the state, its enforcers, and the broader community. Today, as the role of executioner has largely disappeared from modern society, the stigma that once surrounded the profession continues to remind us of the darker aspects of human history and the ways in which society has historically constructed its views on punishment and morality. The executioner's life was both a necessity and a curse, as they lived on the fringes of society, carrying out their duties in isolation and often facing the contempt of those they served. While their work may have been essential, the social cost of holding such a position was immense, and the legacy of the executioner continues to serve as a powerful symbol of the complex relationship between punishment, justice, and social exclusion. From the cold steel of the axe to the weight of moral torment, the executioner's life was anything but ordinary. If you found this glimpse into their world fascinating, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share, because history has some dark stories yet to be uncovered.